And members of the commission, we do have a quorum present. We don't have a chairman, but I would like if one of you members would nominate a chairman I'll give you a hint that realize that Earl has been a chairman of the evening at various times. So we could nominate him, if you would not mind, to become the permanent chairman of the Planning Commission. The rules are such that it has to be a citizen member of the Planning Commission. And if Randy wanted to do it after 3 meetings, I'd have him psychoanalyzed. But
why not?
I don't know. Chairman of the evening sounded a lot more fun than permanent.
Hey, my life's up.
But Earl, are you willing to be permanent? If that was the...
I am willing, yes.
So if somebody would make a nomination, let's do that.
I move to nominate Earl Swapper as our permanent chairman.
I second.
And if we could have a vote of the commission. Go ahead, Patrick, if you begin.
Aye.
Oh, yeah. I missed one meeting. Been to 200 of them.
Alderman Boyd.
Aye.
Commissioner Bradley.
Aye.
Mr. Brown.
Aye.
Alderman Cone.
Aye.
Commissioner Boaz.
Aye.
Commissioner Strowler.
Aye.
And Commissioner Vine.
Aye.
Motion passes with all present voting aye.
Mr. Chairman, the floor is
Thank you. With that, the meeting is officially called to order now. Can we have a roll call? Do we have to have a roll call now? Okay. The next thing on the agenda is the approval of minutes from October the 4th. Are there any comments or motions or?
I move that we approve the minutes from the October 4th meeting. Second.
It's been moved and seconded.
Previous roll.
Previous roll has been called. Any objections to previous roll? Hearing none. Minutes are approved. With that, we're going to make some adjustments to the agenda.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if you go to item number 5, Roman is doing the yeoman's work tonight, and he's also doing number 5.
Okay. So we'll do 2505 is the zoning.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. The proposed rezoning of one dual zone parcel, that meaning that the parcel has more than one zoning district associated with it. It's located at 2505 North Sarah Street, and it's being rezoned from the C multiple family dwelling district at F neighborhood commercial district to just the C zoning district. The site is about a quarter of an acre in size. It's located near the northwest corner of North Sarah Street and Ferdinand Avenue in the Ville neighborhood, a couple blocks away from the former Homer G. Phillips hospital complex. The existing use is a vacant lot, and the petitioner would like to consolidate this parcel with 2 adjacent parcels located to the north, consolidate that into a single parcel in order to construct a 4-family building. That 4-family building is part of a larger residential development project called St. Ferdinand Homes 2. Rezoning only affects this particular parcel. And the petitioner is Northside Community Housing Incorporated, which has done a lot of redevelopment in this area. Mr. Michael Burns is the president of the organization. He's here tonight, and their consultant, Rise Community Development, is also represented by Rick Bonish, who's here tonight as well. So they'll be available for any questions you may have. This is an existing zoning map for the area. As you can see, the northern portion of the parcel is zone C, multiple family, shown in that tan color. The southern portion of the parcel is zone F, neighborhood commercial district, so it has 2 zoning districts associated with it. In order to consolidate that parcel with the 2 parcels immediately to the north, which are already zone C, as you can see in that tan color, 2505 North Sarah Street parcel need to be rezoned. The photo on the left shows the rezoning site. As you can see, it's a vacant lot, and the 2 adjacent parcels to the site at 2513 to 15 North Sarah are also vacant lots. So the four-family building would basically be built between these two structures. The corner mixed-use building will be renovated as part of this overall residential development project, and the smaller building further down the street is not part of the... So that corner commercial building, as you can see, is in poor shape. It will be renovated, as I mentioned, and the commercial building on the right won't be included in this development. Immediately to the east of the rezoning site is the 4,000 block of St. Ferdinand, which is a very, very rough block with most of the parcels either vacant lots or vacant buildings. And that's where most of the St. Ferdinand Homes 2 development will take place. Just a block further to the east is the 3,900 block of St. Ferdinand, which was developed as part of an earlier phase of that same development. And you can see these are homes that were built approximately 10 years or so ago. This is a rendering submitted by a petitioner. As you can see, the four-family building, each unit will be 2 stories. They'll include 2 bedrooms and 2 baths, have a separate entrance onto Union with parking off the rear. Corner commercial building, which you saw is currently dilapidated, will be renovated with leasing offices for the residential development project and apartments above. This is a map, again, submitted by the petitioner. The areas in gray show the extent of the overall development project. The parcels that are included are shown in gray. This is that rough block I was telling you about where most of the redevelopment activity will take place. A dozen of those homes will be coming down, and again, they're in pretty sad shape. The good news is that 9 new buildings will be constructed on the block, and 3 buildings in addition will be renovated as part of that development project. The city strategic land use plan designates the rezoning site as well as much of the adjacent area as a neighborhood development area, which calls for large-scale residential development, and this project obviously qualifies as a large-scale project. The rezoning of the parcel would achieve 3 objectives, according to the zoning administrator. I'll just mention the first one, and that's that the rezoning would allow the petitioner to develop the new residential units that are currently vacant and underutilized. As we saw, the rezoning is in conformity with the city's strategic land use plan, and staff is recommending approval. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and Michael Burns of Rick Myers. Any questions for them?
Are there any questions for Roman or developer to start? Well, Alderman, I'd like to...
Sure. Roman, so it's an irregular shape, that commercial piece?
Yes, it's a funny shaped parcel. And so this piece right here is that vacant corner commercial building. The parcel next to it, for whatever reason, is not a perfect rectangle.
Which was, I guess, a commercial building years ago.
I can tell you what was on that.
Our laundry on the corner.
Right, the corner commercial building is...
No. Where, in the...
The rezoning site?
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you what was there previously.
It's been vacant for a long time.
But right now it's a vacant lot, right?
It's a vacant lot, correct.
And then out of curiosity, go back to the slide that shows the rendering of the 4-family. So, and it's probably for the... So tell me what that yellow is between the buildings.
That's just the way the color shows on the rendering. That's the size of the building.
Is there an awning in that spot too?
Pardon me, Jeff?
Is there an awning in between it?
No, those are awnings over the doorway. That's a 4-family single building.
Okay, I see it. I kind of see the doorway now. That's attached though, right?
Correct.
Out of curiosity, how does that fit that neighborhood over there?
We went through a review with the Cultural Resources Office to develop these plans, and Jan Cameron worked with us to develop those elevations and take into consideration other buildings up and down North Sarah. And actually, the design evolved over time to get to what we have here. I should add also to that this project was submitted for approval by the Missouri Housing Development Commission, 5 successive applications, and we had to, over time, modify the development plan to be able to fit within the cost constraints of the state of Missouri and the city of St. Louis. So that was part of the consideration, also have multifamily rather than single-family homes here.
And tell me again, how many bedrooms each one?
It's a mix of 2, 3, and 4 bedroom units. It's a total of 43 dwelling units of the project. It's actually a mixed income project, 5 market rate units and 38 affordable units.
Okay, maybe I missed something. I thought it was a 4-family unit.
That building there is
That
the
building.
overall project. That's 4 townhouses in that one building. The rehab on the corner will have 2
Okay.
apartments upstairs, a community room in the rear, and, as Roman said, a leasing office in the front.
So a total of 43 units in the overall development.
Oh, with the single-family houses and all of that?
Exactly.
Everything combined.
Okay.
A total of 12 buildings, 9 new construction, 3 PFs.
But you probably don't have it tonight, but out of curiosity, I would be interested in what building currently standing looks like that?
I can hear you.
What building currently standing looks like that building
In the city of St. Louis?
in that neighborhood?
The closest to that would be what McCormick Barron did on North Sarah. It's fairly
Okay.
comparable to that.
Okay.
In terms of scale and massing.
Okay. All right, no further questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Vines?
Just can I ask, I know that you mentioned that 3 buildings were being renovated. Does that include the corner building here? Or is that?
That's one of the 3, and then directly across the street on the south side of St. Ferdinand there is another corner commercial building that will be developed into all residential. It's another former dry cleaners along with that building, and then just to the north, on the east side of North Sarah, in the middle of the block, there is another existing building that will be preserved and got rehabilitated. And I should mention that the Localville Historic District goes to the east side of the alley on the east side of North Sarah. So those 3 present buildings being renovated are all contributing buildings to the Localville Historic District, but all the demos down St. Ferdinand, those are all outside of the Ville Historic District.
And are they just like too far gone to be?
The ones down St. Ferdinand,
Yeah.
they're caving in and really, really bad condition.
I can vouch for that. Many of them look like they've been exposed to the elements for quite some time.
Okay. Thank you.
Seeing no further questions at this point, is there any action?
Move approval.
It's been moved and second. Moved and second.
Previous roll.
Call for previous roll. Any objections? Hearing none, the approval of PDA 7617 is done. Thank you.
And as Roman goes, hold on a second, guys. As Roman goes back to, we'll begin item 3, and goes back and finds that, I just want to make a comment about Northside Community Housing. As you saw this as a mixture of new housing, multiple units, this is an entity that has done multiple phases of development over the years, and really has made a tremendous impact in this overall geography. And I say that in part because we have a tendency that multiple phase projects end at phase 1, and you're getting up into the high single digits for the number of phases you have, and that's to be congratulated.
Yeah, over 200 units of housing in the neighborhood under ownership and management by the city of
All right. With that, the next one is the Forest Park Ordinance District presentation on doing that.
Yeah, so the next 2 items are very closely related. They both involve overlay zoning districts, one of which is proposed to be established and one of which is proposed to be revoked, basically in the same geographic area in the Forest Park Southeast neighborhood. So the first item is, and you may recall at last month's Planning Commission meeting, we did a brief informational presentation on form-based districts to reorient you with this particular overlay zoning district. This agenda item would basically establish the Forest Park Southeast form-based district a recommendation by the Planning Commission and approval by the Board of Aldermen would establish the second district, form-based district in the city, the first being the Central West End form-based district we talked about last month, and that occurred about 5 years or so ago. This action would do two things. It would establish the form-based code, which is a set of zoning regulations that would apply to just this specific area, and it would establish the form-based district, which essentially is a zoning overlay district, again, that would just be for this particular part of town. It would also amend the city zoning district map to implement a new vision for a portion of this neighborhood. The site is approximately 350 acres in size, and it's generally bounded by Interstate 64 on the north, the Union Pacific Railroad tracks, which follow the eastern and southern boundaries, and Kings Highway Boulevard on the west. And most of it, the great majority of it is located in Forest Park Southeast, but there are small slices that are located in the Midtown and Botanical Heights neighborhoods. The hole in the donut here is Adams Park. That park, as well as Shoto Park to the north, were excluded from the boundaries. Just by way of background, Park Central Development Corporation, which is the community development corporation for the area, and we heard from Matt Green and Abdullah, their new director, introductions earlier. They initiated the preparation of a new vision for this neighborhood back in 2014. They included some consultants from H3 Studio, a large steering committee, lots of public input, very long and extensive planning process, and from that, a vision document was created, and that was completed in February of 2015. Before I talk a little bit about the recommendations from that, let me talk a little bit about the area of the neighborhood in particular and some of the neighboring influences. So on the northern area of, or on the other side of the Forest Park Southeast Form-Based District, we've got a number of strong institutions. The Washington University Medical Center, which obviously includes Barnes Jewish Hospital and medical school. The Cortex Innovation District, which is expanding rapidly, and recently built IKEA store. We also have a proposed Metrolink station that would be breaking ground soon at Boyle Avenue, which will also help this particular area. To the east, we have the proposed Foundry development, St. Louis University, which is building its new hospital several blocks to the east. And basically to the south is pretty much ringed by warehouse complexes of one sort or another, although we do have quite a bit of infill housing developments happening in the Botanical Heights neighborhood. And to the west, a block or two away from this photograph is St. Louis University High School, and obviously Forest Park South, the Forest Park itself. So obviously, we have some institutions that are growing very, very rapidly, and some of that change is impacting the Forest Park Southeast neighborhood. In terms of the neighborhood itself, most of the commercial uses appear on Manchester Avenue, which bisects the neighborhood. Some other commercial occurs along Vanderbilt and to a lesser extent Shoto Avenue. The industrial uses are clustered in the northeastern portion of the neighborhood where you see the large building footprints, and they follow along the railroad tracks. And then in terms of residential, most of the renovation and new construction has been occurring north of Manchester Avenue, although there's an increasing amount of infill development also now happening south of Manchester. So a lot of development is happening in the neighborhood. With that, as a little bit of a context, I'd just like to list these recommendations that came out of that neighborhood visioning document, and this is what they hope to achieve. And I'll read these very quickly. Strengthen the Kings Highway Boulevard and Avenue edges of the neighborhood by making them into great walkable streets. Reinforce Manchester Avenue as the main street and central gathering area for the neighborhood. Establish Tower Grove Avenue as a mixed-use neighborhood street between Manchester, Botanical Heights, and Botanical Garden. Build the character of Shoto Avenue as a grand boulevard and residential edge for the neighborhood with strong bicycle connections to Shoto Park and Forest Park. Provide a safe, walkable, and integrated street network across Interstate 64 between the neighborhood, Metrolink, Cortex, Barton Street, and the Central West End. And finally, reinforce the well-established historic and walkable character of the residential cores of the neighborhood with incremental and development. So to reflect that neighborhood vision that was created by this planning process, the city strategic land use plan was amended by the Planning Commission about 18 months or so ago on June 1 of 2016. There were a number of changes. The primary ones were the northeast portion of the site here was changed from business industrial preservation area to an opportunity area. And this was done to recognize some of the impact that's happening from the Cortex. There obviously are some development pressures that are occurring that probably weren't present 10 years or so ago. Kings Highway Boulevard was changed from neighborhood preservation to neighborhood commercial area. Should point out that this area here at the junction of Interstate 64 and Kings Highway Boulevard is property that's owned by MoDOT, and MoDOT no longer needs that land after the reconfiguration of that particular interchange. They want to sell that land, and due to the fact that there weren't any parcels associated with that, there was no strategic land use category at that particular time. So that change involved just designating that as a neighborhood commercial area, consistent with the rest of Kings Highway Boulevard. Shoto Park was changed from an opportunity area to recreational. Manchester was changed from neighborhood commercial to specialty mixed use to encourage more diverse uses. And Sarah Street was also changed from business industrial preservation to specialty mixed use, again recognizing this connection with Cortex and also recognizing the fact that we'll be having a new Metrolink station at Boyle Avenue. In terms of the administration of the form-based district, the existing zoning code will remain in place, but the form-based district or the form-based code will be triggered by a couple of different kinds of permits. The first is all building permits for new construction, building permits for building additions, and the third one is occupancy permits, and this is a little bit different than what occurred in the Central West End form-based district. And the code will again be administered by the zoning administrator. There is a provision there that allows designated people to act for the zoning administrator. They have special skills, and the Cultural Resources Office has been reviewing the building development standards for the Central West End. Likely will be doing the same for Parkside. In addition, the form-based district will continue to be subject to most of the city's existing zoning code procedures. So if there are any appeals regarding the code, those will be heard by the City Board of Adjustment. And any rezonings from one zone to another will again be reviewed by this body, the Planning Commission, and approved by ordinance. The map on the right is the regulating plan for the form-based district, and the regulating plan essentially will serve as the zoning district map for the form-based district. So there are 7 zones, which are commonly called building envelope standards, and they range from a neighborhood general type 2, shown here in yellow, and ranging down to a boulevard type 2, shown here in purple. And so these basically serve the same purpose as the 12 zoning districts that we have in our zoning code, from the A through 11 zoning districts. And this is what a map would look like, a zoning district map would look like, with both the underlying zoning districts from our traditional zoning code overlaid by these new 7 zones. So the A through L zoning districts are represented here in color, from A through L. They're shown here on the map. And the zones are shown by these heavy black boundary lines, you can see. And then the names are noted in these small circles. So in essence, we have an overlay zoning district on top of the city's traditional zoning map. So I mentioned there are 7 of these zones or building envelope standards. And really talk a little bit first about the format for these. These envelope standards basically serve as the zoning regulations for the form-based district, and they follow a standardized format. So the locations for where these regulations apply to are shown on this map. In this case, this is the area shown in yellow. They include an intent statement, which basically describes what the intent of the zoning regulations are, what's hoped to be achieved in this particular part of town, and some photographs that depict what the character of the area desired to be. Also included in the building envelope standards are your standard regulations, a little bit different than our zoning code in that they include some diagrams which make it a little bit easier for lay people to understand some of the terms and regulations. But they include many of the same items that you find in our zoning code, where buildings can be placed, where the setbacks are, how tall a building can be. This is a little bit, this is included in our zoning code. Building types, a section on encroachments and what the parking requirements are. And the last part of the building envelope standards are use requirements, which is whether land uses are allowed use for those basically designated as being permitted, conditional, or not allowed. So those 4 pages are the standard format for each of the building envelope standards or zones. So what I'd like to do, hopefully fairly briefly, is to go through those 7 zones and give you a sort of a thumbnail description of what they call out for. The first one is called the Neighborhood General Type 2, as you can see. The intent of these regulations for this part of town is to preserve and enhance these historic residential areas. As you can see, they're primarily located between Kings Highway and Sarah. And what's being called for is primarily low-density residential uses with a front setback of 0 to 20 feet, and the buildings having 2 to 3 stories. Some examples of those types of uses currently in the neighborhood include the streetscape on the left on Arco Avenue and a couple of recently built buildings on Gibson Avenue. The second zone is the Neighborhood General Type 3. The intent is to establish flexible mixed-use areas for major walkable north-south streets. Those include Taylor, Newstead, Howard Road, and Boyle. And what's being called for is medium-density residential, retail, and office uses would only be allowed on the ground floor. The front setback would be 0 to 10 feet, and the buildings would be 2 to 4 stories. Some examples of those particular building types currently in the neighborhood are shown in different corners of Arco Avenue. The intent of the Neighborhood Center Type 1 is to establish a mixed-use Main Street character and walkable commercial corridor in the heart of the area, which is located along Manchester Avenue and Sarah Street. And what's being called for is retail, office, and residential uses, with residential being allowed only on the upper floors. A front setback of 0 feet, meaning the building would be immediately adjacent to the sidewalk. The buildings would be 3 to 6 stories. There are a couple of designated spots in this area that allow for taller buildings. So again, this is primarily along Manchester Avenue, where the Grove Entertainment District has blossomed. Arguably, the 20 to 25 years or so ago, that Manchester Avenue was pretty much of a ghost town, and obviously being transformed. Next building envelope standard is the Neighborhood Center Type 2. The intent is to allow these areas to transition from mostly industrial uses to more of a mixed-use character. The sites this would apply to are the southwestern and northern portions of the neighborhood. And this would be intended for retail, office, residential, and industrial uses with a front setback of 0 to 20 feet and buildings of 1 to 4 stories in height. These are some existing industrial uses located along Athens. The neighborhood core building envelope standard, the intent is to provide flexibility in height and use for redevelopment while remaining sensitive to the adjacent residential areas. This is located along Kings Highway Boulevard, and it calls for office, residential, and retail uses with a front setback of 10 to 30 feet and 3 to 7 stories. And again, this includes this area here that MoDOT is hoping to sell off because they no longer need that land. Some examples currently out on the site include a series of 4-family buildings in the 1,000 block of Kings Highway Boulevard that are vacant and in bad shape. This is a photo of the land that is currently owned by MoDOT. The intent of the Boulevard Type 1 building envelope standard is to allow this area to transition into a grand residential boulevard with commercial uses and services on the corners. It's located along Shoto Avenue between Taylor and Sarah. What's being called for is residential and with on the ground floor only office uses and retail uses with a front setback of 0 to 20 feet and 2 to 4 stories. And some of the existing uses there currently are the Aventura at Forest Park apartment complex, which was criticized when built for suburban design, and a warehouse complex located further down the street. And the last building envelope standard is Boulevard Type 2. The intent is to allow this area to transition into a more walkable mixed-use corridor. It's located, as you can see, along Van Venner Avenue and along the UP Railroad tracks. It's called for office, retail, and industrial uses, with residential being allowed on the upper floors only, and a front setback of 0 to 10 feet and building height of 2 to 12 stories. So that's a summary of what's being called out for every portion of the geography in the proposed Forest Park Southeast Form-Based District. I forgot to mention there's some examples of the last building envelope standard. On the left is the McKinney Cab Company complex. It's not looking in great shape, so it's actually a reflection of Google's impact on their business. And on the right is the Woodward Lofts, which is a proposed conversion of industrial building into a residential apartment building.
I think, well, this might be a good chance to pause, Mr. Chairman, for any questions. The building envelope standards are very similar to being what we would think of zoning district standards before Wilman gets into the development standards and more about the physical form. Any questions?
I think, so I have a couple questions about some of the, I don't know, and stop me if this is going to be explained later, but occupancy permits. So does that mean, you mentioned that being different from the Central West End standard, so presumably that means certain occupancies would not be permitted and would be...
What I meant to say is that any occupancy permit would now trigger the form-based code. So whether it be somebody coming in for a occupancy permit to occupy a storefront with a cell phone store or whatever, that would now trigger the form-based code. And the contrast I tried to make is that in the case like the Central West End occupancy permits, were not included in one of those triggers. They would only be triggered as part of a related permit, occupancy permit related to a new construction project or a building.
So that's a easier way to get at prohibited uses as primary. So like a pager or cell phone store or something like that, that perhaps could be disallowed. Is that's the intent of the occupancy permit review?
So there is a use table.
Yes, I think that was one of the reasons that we elected to go in that fashion. As I mentioned earlier, the next agenda item deals with the revocation of the special use district, which dealt with trying to better regulate some problematic uses. And I think the decision basically was made that better handled as part of one overlay zoning district, that being the form-based district, as opposed to trying to juggle it and cause confusion if you have two overlay zoning districts, the SUD and the form-based district.
And I think probably to remember is that something has to trigger the form-based code versus the underlying zoning. Occupancy was not a trigger in the Central West End. It is here, so that means, unlike the Central West End where you had to be making some physical change, you might now be the new tenant. And it will be triggered by the form-based code, and are you allowed under the use tables under the form-based code?
Got it. And then I just had a general question. So given that this is new to the neighborhood, and we're talking about materials and that sort of thing, would a project like the Aventura apartments be allowed as they sit today? If this, yeah, all right. Good, but unfortunate that they're there as they are there now.
And that's more in the next one, in the next section.
I'm just curious, Adams Park is not actually a city park, so why is it excluded from the plan? And the school is included in it, but the ball field basically is not.
Guys, tell us.
It's a city-owned parcel by the Parks Department, but it's not officially a city park. Believe that the review committee altogether decided that to remove any parks-owned properties from the zone.
Know that.
I don't think there was any development foreseen for either this park or Shoreville Park. There was no ready-made template for how that would be located.
Okay.
As part of the form-based district, and we elected just to delete it from the boundaries.
So the simple answer is it's not readily sold, but the current zoning of what the parcels are will remain.
The actual city parks are protected from development without a vote of
Right.
a citywide vote. This would not be, but that also brings up other questions that would not be appropriate for this meeting that I'll have to take up with Greg Hayes in the Parks Department, because
But remember, all city parks do have a underlying zoning to them, so that underlying zoning stays in place.
Yeah.
but this isn't a city park. But
It's
But the parcel of land is still regulated by whatever that existing zoning district is, and I suspect it's B, but,
that just raises a whole bunch of questions for me that I'll be taking up with the park.
so let's see if we can derail one. Matt, do you know who the actual owner is of the property?
I looked it up on GeoSim, it was like last week, but it's City of St. Louis Parks and Recreation, something along those lines.
So
a good question for Greg is if it's city-owned property, does it get sold on the same fashion as a real park?
Well, it wouldn't, but there's a whole litany of other questions that I'll have to bring up to Greg.
Take him a cookie. Yeah, right, boy.
Sure. I want to make sure I'm understanding how I'm reading all of this. So the use tables in here reflects. So if I want to go into a particular location on Manchester, for example, the use tables in 5.0 tells me everything that I can potentially be. Is that correct?
yeah, they're used in conjunction with an earlier portion of the document. The use tables in the back basically inventory the various types of uses by category. If you flip back to the building envelope standard for Manchester Avenue, I think it's center type 1, I'm not sure. It'll tell you whether that particular use is not allowed or conditional or permitted. So if I could,
Yeah,
The use tables vary over the 7 districts.
right, I'm just trying to figure out how to read it.
let me, look through it and see if I can help you.
I assume there was a matrix somewhere or something pointed you or referenced it.
Okay, so if you flip to page 314 of the colored document.
Okay,
And so those use requirements apply to the stretch along Manchester Avenue and to a lesser extent, Sarah Street. You'll see
gotcha,
some tables there, and some of those uses are listed there as to whether they're not allowed, conditional, or permitted. And then there's a further breakdown of some of those uses in the use tables in the back.
okay,
So, for instance, under primary retail uses, which is about the 7th or 8th green category, you have beauty supply stores, and those are classified as conditional.
okay. Now, what zone am I in with I want to go back to the Kings Highway, just south of 40. Because I think what I heard was that could be retail, residential.
It was a number of different uses, and before I misspeak, let me make sure
And the reason I bring it up is because I remember having a conversation about a demolition or something on a particular parcel of those four families.
We did.
And I don't remember what it was going to be demolished in, but
And we denied
transformed
that
into.
demolition. Yes, we denied it.
Right, and so but if the form-based code say it could be residential or retail, then doesn't that mean that it could be retail and demolished? Or could?
Good.
But it doesn't mean it should be demolished.
Okay.
If there's a building there.
All right, okay,
It is a vacant structure, it can then have those uses in it. Doesn't necessarily mean it's
Gotcha.
demolished.
okay.
And I think,
Doesn't mean that it's not site consolidated with something else into a bigger picture either.
Okay,
In
At the
general,
moment, it's a building, waiting for a use.
okay,
in general, for the neighborhood core building envelope standard, which includes both those four-family buildings that I showed a photograph of, as well as the MoDOT parcel, allows office, residential, and retail uses.
okay. So,
And remember, when you look at an area, the site consolidation can occur. A redevelopment plan could be put in place, and a redevelopment plan could be put in place for a number of parcels as opposed to individual parcels, then call for action on those number of parcels, and it's Chapter 99, we review it.
okay, I see how that's come together. Okay.
Commissioner Vaughn? General question and just trying to get it oriented. Form-based code, I guess, applies only to structural new construction, correct? Or does it have any application or provisions for like vehicular traffic at all? And the reason I ask, there's a lot of shingle pots and concrete barriers in this neighborhood, and I'm wondering how those fit into the overall vision for the neighborhood.
that was another question for me, given the focus on interconnected transportation, the street network.
Yeah, and I don't know, does that fall under?
They're not covered here in the form-based code. There are, some cities have thoroughfare standards as part of their form-based districts, and I'm not sure if that would be covered with regards to the pots that you're talking about in the middle of streets. There is a provision in our enabling legislation that a form-based district could have thoroughfare standards, but they aren't being used for either the Central West End, the one that was established, or this proposed Forest Park Southeast.
And Randy, I will say that part of the visioning plan that was adopted in 2014, the neighborhood made a concerted effort to want to reopen the streets that is closed. So it's something that they're gonna look, forward to probably using a different policy technique, but just not the form-based code.
So what Roman's reminding us is that the zoning is primarily about the private parcels. It is an application for doing a zone. This is an application from Park Central for this area. Our enabling legislation is a menu of some additional things you can do beyond the form-based code, and one of those is explore doing thoroughfare standards, which does get you out into the right of life, beyond just what you do in front of the front door, and chose not to put it as part of this version of the form-based code. But it's enabled in the city to be able to do that.
Hypothetical question, I want to make sure I'm understanding the occupancy permit triggers the form-based code if a residence is selling their current residence and it does not fall within these parameters. The new purchaser must apply now to be within these?
So Roman and I are going to bail out for just a second and ask anybody from the zoning department that when somebody comes in for an occupancy permit, why are they coming in?
For commercial occupancy, so we review only. We don't do the residential housing conservation certificates.
So one business closes down, another business opens up, we make sure that the way that business is being conducted or the parcel is being used is compatible.
And we do review occupancies, residential occupancies, when there is like an industrial district that does not allow residential use, then yes, we will have a say in that. But for every residential use in the district that comes along, that, you know, everybody who comes in to move into a residence after building residence, we don't approve occupancies for every residential use, but we do have a say as to whether or not a residential use can go into an area that is industrial. You know, we will, require that you go before the Board of Adjustment and get approval. You know, we don't allow any residential in an area where there's factories, there's heavy pollution and things like that. That's with the standard zoning ordinance. Now, I don't know if there may be some areas in the form-based district that prohibit, residential uses as well, particularly on the ground floor. And a lot of the building envelope standards, they may prohibit, residential use on the ground floor. So, yeah, anybody who wants them to come in and renovate a ground floor space to have a residence where it's not allowed, then they would have to appeal to the Board of Adjustment. So, in that instance, we will have a say, but, otherwise, we don't grant occupancies for everybody who moves into a residence. They do that with the dimensional ordinance of the building code. You have to have housing conservation inspections for every residential use.
I think to also go back to Patrick brought this up earlier, just to probably clarify for the commission. If you look at the document as two, one are pretty much all the physical design standards and one are the usage standards. A new construction permit would trigger the design standards and the use requirements. An occupancy permit would only trigger the usage. So if someone moves into a house, someone's an occupancy permit to move into a residential area that's on the fringe of a residential area that's now been converted to a commercial use area. They'd have to adhere to the uses, but they wouldn't have to now all of a sudden build on 2 stories higher or relocate their parking and whatnot. They would just have to adhere to the new use requirements in the document.
I think one way to think about it is primarily a tool in the commercial zones of this area to maintain the temperament and atmosphere that has been so vital for the neighborhood by making sure that if it's just a change in commercial tenancy, the new tenant meets the required of the use.
Okay. Any further questions? Norm, you want to keep going with the second part of this?
Sure. Not much more to do. So we focused a little bit on the uses and some of the other elements of the form-based district. But form-based codes are particularly valuable for, and why they've grown in popularity, is the fact that they're intended to make sure that these buildings fit in not only with the adjacent buildings, but also with the public streets as well. And that's the reason why the Cultural Resources Office has been drafted to review this aspect of the form-based district. So building development standards regulate the form and the design of the buildings, and included in this form-based district, there are 15 building types, 10 frontage types, and there are some architectural standards. So an example of those 15 building types are live-work units, which are shown on the diagram there. It shows where live-work buildings are allowed to be built, and there are some regulations associated with them. What the massing would be, the materials that are allowed, and that was part of the problem with the massing with the Aventura apartment complex. And there's also the frontage types that are allowed as part of those building types. The second item, and that's on the left, are the frontage types. And so some examples there include what kind of awnings and canopies, balconies you can have. And on the right, we have some of the standard architectural standards. So these are a little more complicated for people, and if you're a design professional, you might get a little lost. This is something that isn't included in most traditional city zoning codes.
So just as a good reminder of that, of course, these are, in a general rubric, design standards. So where we often see design standards in a redevelopment plan or in historic districts. This just brings a package of design standards to the zoning process. At the beginning of it's the chapter 4.0 of your book, and you can see it is very extensively illustrated to be helpful as a guide to people who are involved.
Just a couple more items. The enabling legislation for form-based zoning, which was established roughly 5 or 6 years or so ago, has some criteria and some minimum requirements that document what parts of town or what areas can be allowed to become a form-based district. I won't go down that laundry list. It's included in your planning commission resolution, but I can assure you that the form-based district met all of those 3 criteria, as well as the minimum requirements that are listed there. I'll touch on the last one, and that is that this particular form-based district does have the full support of Alderman Brody, and obviously the folks over at Park Central information. I mentioned a while ago that the strategic land use plan was amended by the Planning Commission back in June of 2016. That was done to reflect the new neighborhood vision that was created for the area. This zoning code that's being proposed basically is going to be used as an implementation tool to try to achieve that. So with all that said, the proposed Forest Park Southeast form-based district is in conformity with the city's strategic land use plan. As I mentioned, the district meets the 3 criteria and main requirements that are included in the city's enabling legislation. Staff is recommending approval of the establishment of the form-based district. There's a draft board bill included in your packet. It's not complete, although it's very, very close, and basically allows the director of PDA to make some minor modifications to that before being introduced at the Board of Aldermen. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Let me also acknowledge Matt Green and Abdul of Park Central Development Corporation, and also a number of people who have been involved, I'd say over the last 3 or 4 months, as sort of an interdisciplinary form-based district committee that's been meeting roughly every couple of weeks or so to review this, package it, work with Matt Green. So we have some folks from the zoning section who were introduced earlier, Becky Wright from the council's office, Dan Kraft from the business.
One additional process thing to remember, he is pending your approval and moving on to the law, actually the public hearing itself.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question probably from Matt, since I know he's been quite some time. As I look through the extensive process that you guys went through, I'm always intrigued with mission statements and what people say objectives and goals are. So in here it talks about we are a strong community that wants to continue building a sustainable neighborhood, run our central location, urban history and cultural diversity by 2025. We see Forest Park Southeast as an economically vibrant, mixed-income community with access to a variety of living options, transit, bicycle, recreational amenities, and employment opportunities in the region. My question is, when you say mixed income, what does that look like? And where are you right now compared to where you see yourself being 2025?
Right now, I think the neighborhood has a large number of mixed use, mixed income units that probably most people don't even realize are there. Rise, almost a decade or so ago, redeveloped a number of properties in the area that were built to be low to mid-income, and they've stayed that way. They're currently in the midst of doing another redevelopment on the southern side of the neighborhood with Washington University, and 25% of those units are going to be low income as well. The density that's going to be built into the neighborhood, and we believe and we are hopeful that a number of units that go into those mixed-use buildings will be at the low-income market rate level. And so we're constantly trying to see what we can do to help people stay in their neighborhood, help people stay in their home. I don't see this code as being the only source to achieve that, but we continue to work with the neighborhood and other folks to try to look at policies and ways to keep people there. But again, the code as a whole puts focus back on the neighborhood density, puts focus back on the pedestrians, the walkability. So we believe that building a dense neighborhood will help people with services. They won't have to have a car to drive somewhere else to shop. They'll be able to walk just down the street to grab a bite to eat or go to the grocery store or do their laundry. So we believe that the vision statement that was put forth in the plan, which is the precursor to this, we believe this helps the neighborhood achieve that. Not all of it, but a good portion of it.
Yeah, and I guess I also ask that because I've seen some of the transformation. I'm extremely impressed with it. When I think about where it was maybe 15 years ago and what it looked like, I see the social economic class of people a lot higher, maybe 50% higher than what it used to be 15, 20 years ago. And I think we have, certainly good intentions, but unless we make a real concerted effort that we want to, keep maybe low-income housing tax credit projects in the neighborhood, we will find the Forest Park Southeast will find itself being a Central West End 20 years from now, where it's not really affordable for everybody. And mixed income really looks like someone that makes a household income of $100,000 versus $300,000. So, I think you guys are doing a good job. I believe in density. It's a big deal to me. I like the direction you guys are going into, and it's just my commentary because I'm seeing so much development around the city of St. Louis that I do get concerned about the growth in certain neighborhoods. And though we say we like mixed income, we like diversity, that's not where we end up. Yeah. Sorry.
I hear you, and thank you for that comment.
One final question. I'm curious, are there any shipping container tiny house prohibitions?
No, we don't specifically address either of those. They have to just adhere to some design standards. Dan would be the MGP reviewing this.
Well, on the shipping containers, frankly, there is no
you have to build to a building type,
Sure.
and there is no shipping container building type. So I think that would be something we would have to go to the Board of Adjustment if we're going to do that. But that's why that process is there. And the shipping container project could be done extremely well. It could also be a mess.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to keep in mind, just because something is not included in the plan doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means you need to get a heightened level of scrutiny and real careful consideration before it would be allowed to proceed. On the tiny houses, I don't see why you couldn't build a single-family tiny house per the form-based district now, because there is a single-family house type, and if it's a dwelling unit for one person in a small domicile. As to other aspects of the building code in terms of minimum square feet, I'm not sure about that, but
My understanding
that's
in the
not directly
zoning,
related to the form-based district or the form-based code.
my understanding in the zoning code, there isn't a minimum square footage required. I think I asked Mary Hart that question a while back, but just curious.
I think it's Frank points to a 400 square foot portion of the building code.
Seeing no other questions, any action?
Motion approval.
Second. Moving second to approve the form-based code for approval and have a vote.
Previous roll.
First call for previous roll, any objection? Hearing none, previous roll passes. Thank you for that comment on that particular one. There's a second one that follows it, correct?
And Matt was a young man now. He fortunately was a young man when he started this, but he's grown a lot during the number of years that it's taken to do such a comprehensive document.
So the second related item is a proposed revocation of the Grove Commercial Area Special Use District, or SUD, as we call it. The SUD consists of 133 acres or so. It's located along certain primary streets in the Forest Park Southeast neighborhood, primarily Manchester, Shoto, Tappan, which is a relatively unknown street to the north, Vanaventer, and Tower Grove. And you might note there's a couple of areas, and one of them now they're excluded. So we're just primarily oriented to the commercial and to a lesser extent industrial areas. This SUD was established back in 2008 at the request of the Business Association as well as Alderman Rhodey, and was to better regulate certain problematic uses that were in the area. And keep in mind that in 2008, the Grove and the Forest Park Southeast wasn't quite what it is right now. It's probably in better shape than it was in 1998, but it sort of in a transition stage. But there were a number of problematic uses that it was an attempt to try to better regulate. The proposed Forest Park Southeast form-based district, which we just reviewed, will include more comprehensive land use regulations. You saw the regulations and the land use tables included in that document. Those are more comprehensive than the regulations that are included in the Grove Commercial Area SUD. And as you might remember, it covers a much larger geographic area. So it includes both all of these commercial areas, but also includes residential areas as well. And so to prevent inconsistencies in use regulations and confusion between having two of these overlay zoning districts, Park Central Development Corporation requested the revocation of the special use district.
And we would have most likely insisted upon the revocation.
The Planning Commission is initiating this particular action. So, in looking at the Planning Commission resolution that reviewed this SUD, there were 10 problematic uses that were identified when the SUD was being proposed, and you can see it's sort of a common laundry list that a lot of neighborhoods. This is an existing zoning map, and as you can see, much of the SUD area, included in those black boundary lines, have commercial or industrial zoning districts associated with them. Industrial along Appin, a combination of industrial and neighborhood commercial along Shoto, local commercial and office along Manchester, industrial along Vanderbilt, and neighborhood commercial along the Garfield Avenue. In terms of the city strategic land use plan, as we mentioned for the previous agenda item, the SLUIP was changed in 2016 to better reflect the neighborhood vision document. The revocation of this SUD would have no impact on the strategic land use plan. And then in terms of the comments, the proposed revocation of this SUD would achieve two objectives. It would remove a zoning overlay district that in effect would be made obsolete by the form-based district when it's enacted, by including more comprehensive land use regulations and also covering a larger geographic area. And again, it would prevent inconsistencies in the use regulation and confusion with having to administer two different overlay zoning districts, which may or may not conflict. As I mentioned, the revocation of the SUD is in conformity with the strategic land use plan, and staff is recommending the revocation of the SUD by repealing the ordinance that established it.
With that, any questions for Truman?
Move approval.
Move for approval, do I have a second? Been seconded.
Previous roll.
I'll call for previous roll. Any objections? Move second approved by previous roll. This is passed and moved on to the next item. Thank you very much.
So two things to remember. SUDs are neighborhood protection activity at an overlay. We'll have a big one coming up in the next 2 months. Areas to regulate junkyards and obnoxious things. And the Grove was a little bit of a mixture. It was the help to try to promote some things that would make the collective uses along those arterials be more in the Grove, keeping some things about takeout windows and things that might be worthwhile, so it was proactive that way. But doing it from scratch with a form-based code is a much better way.
Since Don is talking, why don't we go ahead and have Don continue? Looks like 8817, zoning and text. Mr. Kane, thank you for coming.
Thanks.
Sorry, I think I told you.
Well, what did you do that you drew the straw that you said?
Why didn't you bail out?
So Mary's on the phone and Rebecca's here. If you notice your packet, there's, on this one, there's not a single line. It's all words.
Just an FYI, we're gonna lose the quorum.
Well, I mean, I can stretch it to about 7:25, but I have to pick up my son.
Just let you know.
Is that a problem?
Alderman Boyd, will you express approval that Don is quick?
Yes.
Yes. Please. By all means.
So, and I want to thank, planning staff is pretty short, pretty thin these days, so this has been a project that Becky has been working on extensively. She gets to correct me at any point when I screw up. Connie Tomasula, who's an urban designer on our staff, and therefore works most carefully with visuals and not words, did the artful job of this resolution, which is something that we wanted to have and in the books for legal challenge. But we're essentially doing a cleanup here, rezoning by initiation. We're doing it to discontinue something called the plat and petition process. If you think of the advertisement talking about current Buicks as not being your father's Buicks and all Buicks being your father's Buicks, this is your grandfather's zoning, or grandfather's regulatory method. A number of uses in the city require a plat and petition process for getting it approved. That's not all within the zoning code. It's really not within the zoning code. And why do I have this one up?
Yeah.
We go here.
It's not going to be.
Okay. Yeah, here we go. Yeah. So this is citywide, it's amending the code, it's getting rid of the plat and petition process, or the zoning code's response to the plat and petition process, which is for other uses. This plat and petition thing has a whole bunch of these types of uses that are strange and odd and old, that you need the plat and petition. There's a number of, are there two companion bills for this?
Yeah, so there are, these uses are actually regulated, and the plat and petition requirements are actually contained in the licensing code, as well as the Chapter 25, which is the building code. So we have two companion bills that are going to go and be introduced to the Board of Aldermen at the same time, and essentially what it does is it gets rid of the plat and petition process and those other codes, and then makes them regulated under the zoning code as either conditional uses, use by right, or prohibited uses.
And these are examples of the types. That removal of that process will affect and will further regulate than the zoning code. So this zoning text changes will do as Becky just said, is we're going to change certain uses from a use by right to a conditional use. And if you remember the plat and petition process, it sounds participatory. It is to a certain degree. An owner is going out and collecting signatures. The conditional use process is one where we all know there's a notified public hearing for people nearby. They come and they get to express their opinions and concerns at a hearing officer at City Hall. That's what's going to happen, is that most of these uses will go to a conditional use. So is a way of reflecting and getting public input as was done with the plat and petition. There are a few, though, of these uses that are changing from a use by right to simply being prohibited in the zoning code. And you see the short list of that: boarding houses, dormitories, and rooming houses, and homeless shelters in certain geographies and zoning districts. Your single-spaced, two-sided resolution had all of this in narrative form, and I regret that this doesn't project as hard as it might be. But this is a summary of how they're currently treated for a plat petition item in the city, and a rough listing of what they are. And then they're just summarized here as a change to these. And the most noted ones are as you would see in your, you see it up there, you can see it better than I. But the tables in your resolution is quite specific, same reflected here, of what becomes conditional use, what's not allowed. So a rooming house, for example, just given in the L district, will no longer be allowed. It won't be allowed in the J or I district either. So it is specific to those four uses that you have. The other things like daycare centers, group homes, social rehabilitation centers, they all now become conditional uses. And so just be thinking about those four uses now prohibited in some zones, and the plat and petition, which was that signatory process, is replaced with conditional uses, conditional use hearings for the public to display their desirability of this to be in the neighborhood, and then also for the idea that it could be allowed, but with some conditions. So it's really
So, under the worst of processes, somebody wants to put a homeless shelter up. It is a conditional use process, which means the public now has a right to open hearing. Who makes that final decision?
Well, the homeless shelter's now been changed to a not allowed use in many of the districts. But a commercial use, conditional use is, what it ends up at BPS. That's right.
You decided that after the hearing,
The board.
after the hearing.
That's right. Okay. So one of the things that Mary and Becky told me when they were looking at this is that they discovered other cities had stopped using this flat petition process about 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's,
the A through E are all residential code. The
Correct,
E is
correct.
multifamily dwelling district over a certain number of units, right? And then F through H are generally like neighborhood commercial through like downtown commercial or whatever it is.
Yeah, getting into I.
often just thinking I is the downtown district.
So this actually just came up in a conversation I had with Frank about pawnbrokers. Well, because Family Loan is potentially wanting to relocate.
Okay.
And kind of in the same geographic area, but, you know, they don't want to do so if they have to, well, right now I think they're prohibited.
Is that, in this, I have some memory that there may also be, and I have to look back at the, I was really into combo, but there also may be a provision that limits the number of pawnbrokers in the actual city. Is this what you're talking about?
So, yeah, I might have to take it offline with you because
Right.
I don't.
We may have to talk about that later, because I've had some conversations with the land collectors about
The
it.
guy who owns the firm is actually, I think, planning on retiring and he wants to sell the business to his employees. But, you know, there's a lot of different things in play right now, so.
Well, in the residential zone, he's never been allowed.
Right, well, Locust is not, or Jefferson is not a residential zone, so that's not of concern.
And
Neither is Olive.
And in the other areas, there was at one time when it would be permitted, but it's well off mission, so it's not prohibited. But like Becky says, there are some of our more complicated uses still have some other layering as to how they're placed and how they're allowed.
Commissioner? Yes, what about, I see daycares, adult and regular daycare, 24 hours, but what about in-home daycares? You know, I get calls all the time. I tend to not support them because they don't end up being in-home daycare. It's a commercial daycare. They live in the county somewhere. But I didn't see that in here. So would that still just be a...
So, let me see if I can see how currently traced. My memory, and we just had one today at the Board of Adjustment, is that those are treated like a residential home, and I think that there may be certain provisions within the zoning code that allow that, and it's regulated by the state. So I think this is only getting those that are special regulated uses under Chapter 25, where it's more commercial in nature. I don't know if Mary can hear. Mary?
Mary?
Hello.
We didn't lose her, we didn't know about it.
Yeah.
I haven't heard anything.
Maybe Terrell could get
Yeah, home daycares, you know, they are regulated in the zoning right now. They are normally require conditional use approval pretty much in all zones. But now the thing that sends, what requires a daycare per the choice right here to have a flat petition is when you're 24 hours.
Oh.
When you're keeping kids overnight. In a home daycare, you can't do that at all. You can't keep kids 24 hours in your home. Otherwise, you'd have to apply for commercial occupancy to do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Home daycares, you're not allowed to, you know, keep kids overnight, please, and you can't have any more than 10 kids, you know, in the home.
But that's So that's condition, that's always been conditional use. It never had to have a platinum petition?
No, not a home daycare, because, they're not allowed to be 24 hours, so no, we don't. The only reason that adult facilities, adult daycares or home day, or a daycare is only existed because, there's some that are 24 hours.
Okay.
The 24-hour establishments, which is like an over facility, that those require signatures of neighbors, have parents come and pick it up kids.
Okay.
Midnight and 3 o'clock in the morning,
Right.
after they get off work, whatever, they may have concern about that. So that's why they require the signature process, but.
And we're taking that away, right?
We're removing the platinum petition requirement and for these commercial type daycares and making them go to a conditional use area.
Okay.
So I would reference the two aldermen in particular, that just keep exhibit B handy.
It's right here.
Hi, while we're on the subject though, so on here, and this is a particular point of contention for me, we have the transitional living facility, the halfway houses, group homes, social rehab facilities, et cetera. Probably about 10 to 20% of my ward is used in such a capacity. It does not have any kind of conditional use and has never done a platinum petition.
Right.
So existing uses would be grandfathered.
No, they've not been.
Well, you're saying they've never gone through.
Right.
You mean
Just do it on their own.
Before we make this legislation, they've slipped in somehow.
I'm saying they're just illegally operating as such and I've brought this to the attention of Frank Oswald in the past, and he says that just because they fit underneath the building code for the number of units, occupants per apartment, that it's too difficult to enforce legally, that they would need to go through that process. So, for instance, I had a group home that was dealing with substance abuse folks, and they had a two-family, and there were nuisances, fights, all sorts of things happening there all hours of the day and night. And they literally had a website up marketing this two-family as like a transitional home.
And how many residents were they having in it?
6. So there were 3 per unit.
I'd have to look at, there's certain types of, and I don't have everything in front of me right now to answer this question, but there are certain ones that will qualify as, under federal law for certain types of, substance abuse. They get special, protection. Now, if it gets over a certain number of people living in it,
Well,
that's
I have a
really
100-unit apartment complex that's north of Cleveland High School that the owner was partnering with St. Patrick's Center and had every unit was leased up with people.
and they're independent units.
Right.
So all of them.
But literally, that's
what the whole purpose of the apartment is, right?
The apartment.
The concentration of it is the
Right.
concern. Yeah.
They're using it for commercial purpose and making money off of, transitional housing services.
So all of them, if I could, because we're in the interest, we got 2 action items to go.
Yeah.
Well,
Because
to me, that's it doesn't matter at all, like, whether it's a conditional use or not, because we don't do anything about them anyway.
inaction is another action. I'll just show you this is a reminder that this is, some ways helping many businesses have an ease of access, to be business friendly. It is in just current and zoning techniques are fairly archaic. We want to lessen red tape. But it also empowers neighborhoods because there will be the conditional use process where you can get the word out and show up and participate in the approval of that. We do these comments to say that it is a modernization of the zoning code. It's citywide, it's text-wise, it's a text change, and we would recommend your approval of this proposed change to the zoning text.
So moved.
Can I just ask a process question on this? So we pass this here, and it gets introduced as legislation over the board,
Right.
and then it'll inevitably, I'm sure, go to HUD,
Housing, zoning, the zoning in the name.
zoning, right? So, it'll just go through, like, the regular legislative process at that
Yes.
point, right? Okay,
And so the draft board bill that Becky wrote is in the packet.
yeah, I saw that, I took a photo of it,
It has been moved.
Second, previous roll.
And called for previous roll. Any objections? Hearing none. It is passed. No. Now you get about.
Well, Roman's going to do this one. The last action item is a redevelopment plan. It's a simple one. It is for a school building, and I'll let Roman step up and look through it.
Very quickly, it's a redevelopment plan for the 1020 Union Avenue and 50-something from Cape Avenue redevelopment area. It sits on about a 2.5 acre site. It consists of two parcels in the 1,000 block of Union Boulevard in the Academy neighborhood. It's located in both a national and a local historic district, and it's located along a stretch of Union between Delmar and Page, where there's an impressive array of institutional buildings located there. The existing use is a vacant former school building and a parking lot that is formerly known as Clark School. The building is in fair condition, and what's being proposed is a $4 million renovation of that, and conversion of that building into 45 apartments. The prospective developer is Clark Union LLC. Photo on the left shows a front of the building. It was designed by William B. Ittner. You can see it's a knockout building. The photo on the right shows the rear of the building as well as the parking lot. Just to the south of the site are some attached townhomes, some of which are in good condition, others aren't. Just to the east of the parking lot is the former Hoodie-Mont line streetcar right-of-way, which is proposed to have some sort of a trail established in the future for it, and some residential buildings further down the street. I mentioned there are some impressive institutional buildings just to the north on Union Boulevard of the rezoning site is the Academy Branch Library, and to the south is Soledad High School, which again is another Ittner design. The site is designated as an institutional preservation and development area. The city's, or the strategic land use plan's adjacency rule does allow a redevelopment plan or a proposed use if the proposed use is allowed in an adjacent strategic land use category. So while the apartment building may not necessarily be an adjacent use, it is allowed in that neighborhood preservation area shown in red, so it is in conformity with the city's strategic land use plan. There is no eminent domain. The proposal is for 10 years of tax abatement. I should note that Alderman Williamson supports 25 years of tax abatement. So that issue will have to get wrestled with over at the Board of Aldermen. And staff is recommending approval of the redevelopment plan.
With that, any questions?
Is that a low-income housing tax credit program project?
I have some difficulties in talking with the developer. And I think it's market rate. I know that the developer has done some projects in the area, including Enron schools, but I'm not familiar with the particular.
So two difficulties you may notice, like, it's been through LCRA quite a while ago. They have some new staff. It took excruciating to get some details out for the mailing, and Roman had other trouble getting communications. But it's the renovation of the school into apartments that hopefully the developer will be successful at.
On Arlington, 800 Arlington is a school just to the west of there. I don't recall them having 25 years tax abatement when they renovate. Those are market rate, I believe, as well.
25 years not in our purview, but Roman's giving a heads up that that's in the works.
Good thing you guys get to vote on that.
I'm not on neighborhood development, I
So
think
with that-
vote on it.
With that,
If it
any
comes
other questions? Any action?
Now, we are approving this with 10 years.
We're not
No,
approving
we're not
anything.
approving any tax.
What-
Yeah,
We don't approve taxes.
I mean,
It's just a note for your FYI.
Yeah.
So remember, we're approving that this is blighted.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, there is tax abatement as part of the redevelopment plan. The redevelopment plan requires a determination of blight. We have to make that.
Okay.
Don't make that. We have to approve the elements of the redevelopment plan that the uses are in conjunction with the strategic land use plan,
Mhm.
and there are design standards in these that are effective about the form and function, and we approve those, but not the map.
Can I ask a?
Can we get to a vote so Randy can?
Yeah, well, I'm, if we were just to vote no on approving the blight,
Well,
can they still move forward through the
Mhm.
process? I mean, I'm sure that's happened before, you know.
Are you sure it's
We
happening?
move on before it ever gets approved all right.
yeah, so.
Well, and along those lines, renovation work is proceeding full, in the middle.
So, two things. One, David can close his ears. I'm not the happiest about how a developer getting incentives and when their starting point into the building and when the starting point into the city's approval processes are. They get out of sync, as we know. There's also is then a later, sometimes out of sync between the approval process of the various boards and of the Board of Aldermen. That's all given. But with that said, this is an item that we're making a recommendation of to the Board of Aldermen so we can be trumped.
Very good. Okay.
So moved.
Been moved,
Second.
been seconded,
Previous roll.
previous roll, any objection?
No.
Seeing no objections, let it pass as blighted.
Change.
No more action items to be?
But I want to say.
There's one more thing from.
A few more things, but we don't.
Hi, Randy. You know, I got 16 years. Got 16 years on Delmar.
I'll say this, Randy served this as coming out, so I'll do this as an informational item. We won in another court case.
Guess what?
Gentlemen, we won in another court. In a preservation review that we held up. It was a while ago, it's been in the court system for a while. Those of you may remember out there, it's the property that's next to the Sales Church. The lawyer that sat in this seat,
On Jefferson?
on Gravely,
Or Gravel?
that represented the owner, which was the Archdiocese.
I remember.
You might think lawyers sometimes come with different stereotypes as to their bedside manner. He had
Not
bedside manner, and he did take our decision to court, and they lost. The building is deemed.
So how does that work if they, say, let's say they just choose to neglect it? I mean, we have the demolition through neglect bill, but,
They continue to be cited and, eventually put them in jail.
Archbishop?
Wouldn't that be interesting?
That would not be interesting. But two things. So we're liking the fact that we're being upheld. Now, these are pretty straightforward projects. Dan's going to get a task. Dan, you're going to get a task to look through the ones that we've been upheld on, because they've been very nicely worded. I mean, completely worded, but we want to make sure that what are the weak points in our process, if there are any, and firm those up or be conscious of that. So that was good news. We like doing that. It gives us some substance when we say just pass on them and go to court. These have not been particularly complicated ones, but that's an informational item I wanted to tell you about, which is really the most important because that is good news.
Has Drury filed a case yet
Huh?
has Drury filed a case yet for the?
They have not, and they passed the deadline, I believe.
Okay.
So they can, by the way, now, they were here.
Mm-hmm.
So I did mention that a redevelopment plan could be formulated that might talk about the fate of these buildings. And I think somebody here was talking about if they were to do something comprehensive, it's different than individual.
Patrick and I are both here.
So these alley vacations, I just want to get your consensus, I told you that this could be delegated off to me, but just to remind you that these unimproved rights-of-way, you can just see in this one, it's that little L, those lots are all going to be consolidated, and the housing developer is going to do it, so it's not a massive street vacation of Acton Way. This next one is downtown along the railroad track. It's in an area owned by U.S. Paint that has owned this property for decades and decades. You'll see it here in the picture, that it's their property. It's not city streets, it's just gravel, and they would own the property and consolidate it. This last one is up on the North Riverfront in Baden. Again, it's abutting properties are participating. It's unpaved. It's largely industrial with some houses nearby, but it will consolidate their property. It looks sort of nice and rectangular on the paper plat sheets on the left, but it's really just a mishmash of nothing that's really a through and used street. So I'll tell you that these are the one types of things that we get that are vacations that are essentially paper streets, do not have a through aspect for travel, and it's a consolidation.
Don, can you go back just one for a second?
Sure.
The railroad track, this one, why don't they come all the way out? Is there a reason why this is not coming out?
Oh, can't say that I know the reason, but I bet you they come to one parcel there.
And I guess belongs to 2274 Main, okay.
So the part of what I want to tell you is with limited staff, we'd like to do a little triage so that in the future we will want to bring ones. There's going to be some probably proposed in Alderman Boyd's ward that are street vacations in residential areas that will. Patrick, we agree that we probably should bring those types to the full board. We haven't in the past. But these that generally are unimproved streets probably will approve using my delegation powers.
Okay, thanks, Don.
Right. We're done.
Any other?
So with the vacation though, is there a way for them to pay us for the land? I mean,
Ordinance, they own it anyway.
Yeah, that's the truth. They own it anyway.
They don't own the street.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a much debated
Check your
issue,
deed.
but technically, in the older city, they loan, the original property owners loan use of that land to the center point.
I gotcha, okay. Yeah, we just have a public easement on it, we're eliminating the public easement. I gotcha. Okay.
It's a little more complicated. There's some places where Rich has gone out and bought property in the first
Yeah. Right.
But when you go back to the original planning, they gave it up.
Yeah, and why we make people pay for their own sidewalks. Yeah, I gotcha.
All right. Thank you all. We'll be in December. We're liable to have, we do have, tell people we have planning position open. It's posted on the city website. It will be advertised nationally beginning Monday. And we hope to have that process go quickly. Dick Zerica, who formerly worked for us, is working as a consultant on an SUD, the social use district around the NGA. And if all goes well, we'll see him in that process in December.
Do I have a motion to close the meeting?
Thank you.
Don, I have something.
Don't need me to repeat that.